Hello and welcome to another installment of Conquering My Collection and another Masters of Cinema disc. This is spine number 132 in the collection, and it is, ironically enough, Eureka. From Eureka. Now I just feel like Criterion need to release a film called Criterion and all will be right with the universe. But this film, 1983, directed by Nicholas Roeg, so I believe you say it. I don't think I've seen any of his other films. I know that he's quite a notable director from like the 70s and 80s, and this film, when I first heard it was being released by the Massive Cinema range, the first thing that jumped out to me was the cast. You got Gene Hackman, Rutger Hauer, Mickey Rourke, Joe Pesci, Theresa Russell. It's a stacked cast. I didn't even know anything about the film. I didn't really want to, and it ultimately became years before I even bought this, which was fairly recently. I got this through in the mail. I put it right in. I actually watched this over a few sittings during my work breaks. I come home for lunch, or my version of lunch when I do late shifts, and so I kind of watched it in bits, and that kind of was it really worked because the story is almost in bits, kind of. I think it's quite an uneven film, and it's about Gene Hackman's character, Jack McGann, I think is his name. Yeah, and very interesting opening sequence of this film. The first like 20 minutes or so, I said this in my Blu-ray update video, it's cinematic poetry. It's just very abstract at times in terms of the editing and the visuals, and we follow Jack McGann. Is it McGann or McCann? McCann. We follow Jack McCann out in this snowy wilderness somewhere, and at the beginning he's at this campsite and he's fighting with the people that he's traveling with, and there's a line he keeps repeating. And this is where like the poetry comes into. I think the line he says is, I never made a nickel off another man's sweat." And he just keeps repeating it. He's walking off into the snow. "I never made a nickel off another man's sweat." And he's just becomes obsessed with finding gold. That's why he's out there. That's presumably why he was there with a group of people camping. And he leaves them behind. He goes off on his own. He comes into town. And I'm at risk here of just explaining what happens in the movie, but I really need to talk about this. He comes into town. And there's this man sitting outside one of the houses or buildings. I think it might be like a government office or something. And this guy's just sat there in the snow, just like smiling at him. And Jack's like, what are you smiling at? What are you looking at? And the guy just pulls a gun out of his pocket. I think he says something and then he just puts the gun in his mouth and he blows his brains out. And it's like one of those shocking moments where it's like an actual head that is being, the back of it explodes. It's like a practical effect, and it's horrifying. And Jack runs off, and as he's running off and stumbling into the snow, he keeps seeing it. It's like flashing in his mind, and we see the gun and the head exploding from different angles, and it's like, it's really graphic. I'm assuming, yeah, this is an 18 rated, contains strong violence. And, so immediately it's a very haunting film, and his quest for gold, he ends up at this brothel, and it's very dreamy. I feel like David Lynch would probably appreciate this part of the film. And eventually he does find gold. And there's this woman, I don't know, she's not Theresa Russell, that's his daughter in the film. But the actress who plays the woman at the brothel who he has an interaction with does a really interesting job. And it's very spacey and dreamy, and the dialogue, it's not normal dialogue, but it's very, again, poetic is the only term I can think of. And I really enjoyed that, even though I could see people being frustrated with it because it's not very conventional. And the things that they're saying it's more about the feeling than a logical conversation, I think. And it really worked. And I just thought that it was just captivating. Couldn't wait to see where it was going next. Now, I did grab the booklet. No, I didn't. It's still inside the case. Because I don't edit pictures into these videos with Conquering My Collection, but I wanted to show you just a visual representation here of what Gene Hackman looks like in the beginning of this film. As he's, almost going mad looking for this gold. So here's the way he looks. Kind of dark hair, dark beard. Early 80s is what you would expect. Suddenly, after the kind of 20-minute introduction, he now looks like this. Much older, grey hair, white beard, or white mustache, I should say. And I was like, oh, well, there's a time jump. And now Jack is living in the Caribbean. There's a brief sequence where he went back to where he'd originally found the gold, but the majority of the movie, Eureka, is set 20 years after he found the gold, and he's now a very rich man living in the Caribbean. Eureka is the name of the house that he has. He owns an island there, and the bulk of the movie is about this guy, played by Joe Pesci, who wants to basically build a casino on this island. So he basically wants Jack to sell away Eureka, but he won't budge. You know, this is his island. You know, he earned this with the, you know, finding the gold and everything. Mickey Rourke plays a lawyer, I believe, working with Joe Pesci. Now, Joe Pesci and Mickey Rourke, you know, you look at the cast list, you're like, oh, these, you know, great actors. They don't have too much to do. Joe Pesci looks very young in this, and I think I looked it up, and he was still like, I think 40 or something ridiculous like that, but he looked quite young. No, it couldn't have been 40, maybe like mid-30s. Anyway, but you know, seeing Joe Pesci quite young was interesting with hair, but he's got this like weird kind of buck teeth, which obviously must have been fake teeth, and there's not too much to his character. I don't know if like he just wasn't written very well, and he didn't have much to sink his teeth into, no pun intended. But Joe Pesci was fairly unremarkable in this. Mickey Rourke was a bit more interesting. He's got that kind of charisma and swagger without really doing much. But ultimately, he didn't have too big a part to play either. Where the film really shines is where Rutger Hauer comes into it. And he plays, I think it's, I forget the character, Casper von something. He's like this fancy French guy who is dating Jack's daughter. I forget her name. That's going to make things difficult. Right, okay, but Jack's daughter, played by Teresa Russell, she's about 20, and she's seeing this guy, Rutger Hauer, who's, you know, significantly older than her, but they don't play into that too much, you know. But regardless, they're in this relationship, and, you know, Rutger Hauer he's a bit smarmy, seems, you know, fairly, you know, unassuming, but there's a tension between him and Jack. And it's to do with the money that Jack has, and also the relationship that he has with Jack's daughter, which her parents don't really approve of. And so there's a lot of tension there, but it's under the surface. I love the way that it plays through. But also this the relationship that Jack has with his butler. The actor who played him was very good. I like that dynamic between the two of them. It's a great scene on the beach where they have a very passive-aggressive conversation, and Jack kind of goes off very, you know, pleased with himself. And his butler is, you know, his kind of right-hand man. Just, I think he says something, "You're so fucking selfish." Like he like says it out loud just as soon as Jack is far enough out of, you know, out of earshot. And that was a really telling scene. I really liked that. But it's a really fascinating character film. I have to say, I really was drawn in by the characters. There's a really not moving, a gripping scene that, you know, it's just kind of, it makes me kind of lean forward a bit, was when Rutger Hauer's character gets a phone call. And he has this party, and, you know, everyone's kind of, it's like high society kind of thing. And he gets a phone call, and it's really bad. And he's just like, everyone needs to leave. And they're like, oh, come on, it can't be that bad. And he just starts throwing stuff. But it's like this Rutger Hauer thing where, you know, you'd feel like a scene where someone loses their shit and starts throwing stuff around. They'd be like, ah, and throwing things and smashing things up. But he like picks things up, and he's kind of stilted about it, and he half throws it, and he's, you know, and it feels like someone who just doesn't know what the fuck to do. And it was such an interesting way to play it, and I was so like mesmerized by it. And then, you know, he kind of collapses on a chair, and, you know, Jack's daughter comes over to see what's wrong, and he looks at her and he just slaps her in the face. And I'm like, holy shit, did she cheat on him or something? And then he grabs her and he pulls her in for a hug, and he just doesn't, it's like he doesn't know what to do, and he just hits her, you know. And it turns out his mother had passed away in France, and he felt so guilty that he had left France because of that. And so I liked how I was piecing together, why did he slap her? Was it maybe like, you know, he feels she's responsible because his relationship with her took him away from his mother? But, you know, he holds on to her tightly, and they have this very charged conversation. I love their dynamic. There's a point where they're kind of getting sexual and stuff, and he starts speaking to her about these things, and she just says, stop right there, pretty much. This is very much paraphrasing, but she's like, you know, you can have my body, you do anything with my body you want, but don't get inside my head, which was really weird because she's very possessive of him, but also she feels like she needs to nurture him, which is an interesting dynamic when he's a lot older than she is. It's almost like he's a broken man that she wants to kind of fix, but at the same time, there's a point where she says to him, I feel like this relationship is much more about you than it's about me, you know. So it doesn't fully fit for me by the end of the film, their relationship. I don't quite make out what really is going on there, but I like that about it. I like that I'm interested enough to want to work it out, but I think that ultimately it doesn't quite gel together in a satisfying way by the end. I liked where their relationship ended by the end of the film. That was kind of a good moment, but I wasn't sure, not to say that it ends, but like, the point where we leave those two characters at the end of the film. But it's, yeah, I don't know, it's intriguing. And then there are moments that I get really into, and that moment where he slapped her was just so intriguing to me. It was like such a weird, I've never seen someone play, grief like that. And I think Rutger Hauer just kind of nailed it. And this is like, for me, prime Rutger Hauer, just after he made Blade Runner, which is, I think, one of my favorite performances of all time. So I was really looking forward to seeing him in this film. He didn't disappoint. There's a great scene between him and Gene Hackman. There's like a big, not big, but a sizable kind of family dinner, and the way they're kind of throwing barbs at each other, where Rutger Hauer's character feels like Jack hasn't earned his money. He just found that gold, and that gold belongs to nature. And so they really test each other, and that's really fun. And there's another scene which I found really uncomfortable for the wrong reasons, and it's when Gene Hackman, Jack, bursts into Rutger Hauer's house, and in the bed is Rutger Hauer and Theresa Russell, Jack's daughter and her lover, and they're completely naked. They've been up all night having sex, and the shot of the bed is like from like the bed level, looking like towards them. So you're seeing their feet up, and you can see everything. Like, and she turns around, and it's like the basic instinct moment. You can't not look. Like, did I just see that? Rutger Hauer's balls on full display, pretty much, and I just thought, why? It felt really weird to me, and I was just imagining the conversation that Nicholas Roeg would have had with Theresa Russell, saying, okay, in this shot we're going to have you fully naked, and we're going to shoot from like, the low angle, the bed up, and, did she say, well, they'll see everything? Can I just put the sheet over, my midsection? No, we need to see everything. It seemed so unnecessary and uncomfortable to me, and I've had people comment, when I talk about this stuff in films, they say that I'm a prude. I don't think that I am, but it just seems unnecessary to me to show all that detail. For what purpose? It just seemed a bit odd, and it made me aware of the filmmaking choices at a moment where I shouldn't have been aware of that, if that makes sense. Like, a sheet draped over them, fine, maybe you can see things, but such an unflattering angle. It just was, it was weird, But where that scene progresses is a lot more interesting and kind of distracts you from the weird. And there's other stuff. There's like an orgy scene at this kind of Caribbean club, which is very strange, and animals are definitely getting hurt in that scene, and I find that very uncomfortable too, unfortunately. I don't see the need for it. But anyway, those two kind of gripes aside, where I became uncomfortable watching those things unfold, I think it's a very good film. And it kind of changes again a third time, and there's kind of an extended epilogue, which is much different. And I'd read people say that that's where the film falls apart. I really liked the epilogue. I liked, it's not even an epilogue, it's like it is an extended part of the film. It's kind of the final part of the story. But there is a moment in this film that will never leave me. In fact, the guy shooting his brains out at the beginning will never leave me. But there's a murder in this film that is one of the most chilling things I've ever seen. And I don't really, maybe I'll do like a spoiler thing at the end here, because I want to describe it, but I don't want to at the same time. But it's unforgettable. Overall, I think the film is really, really good. It never quite gets as memorable as its opening passage, but there's just some great moments, and I loved how Gene Hackman's great in this film. The way he portrayed this character, who he has everything, but he doesn't at the same time, and it's kind of the whole thing about gold and man's quest and the greed of man is a very interesting device to use for a story, because I think most people can relate with greed in some way, shape, or form. I think we've all at one point in our lives been greedy for something, whether it's, there's so many ways you can, interpret that, but money makes the world go round. I think all of us wish we had more money to make our lives easier, and so on and so forth, and that could be a whole other conversation about whether that does make people's lives easier, and this is very much a case for it maybe not being that. This guy owns his own island. Is he happy? Does he have a well-adjusted relationship with his daughter? No. What does he really have left? His relationship with his wife is not very good, and that is explored a little bit. I would have liked more of the stuff with his wife. I thought the actress who played her was very good, and there could have been more to kind of dig into with that as well. There's a nice nod. I mean, this film is about, a man who finds gold, and how it kind of in a way destroys his life. But there's a scene where he gets into the back of a car, I think it is, and he's being driven around, and he just looks out the window, and there's a poster for Chaplin's The Gold Rush. I thought it was a nice little tip of the hat to Chaplin there, and that masterpiece of the silent era. Anyway, yeah, so overall, I really liked it. I would definitely watch it again. I think it's got a very good cast, and the story. Yeah, so one more thing about the character of Jack, and he brings back that phrase of, I never made a nickel off another man's sweat. He feels so self-righteous of this gold that he's found and how he believes he earned it, and you can debate whether he did or not. He certainly went through a lot to get it, but did he really work for that? It's up for debate. But well, it probably wouldn't be a very long debate. He didn't really work all that hard for it in terms of a lifetime, but and that's again a whole other way you can take this kind of story about people who come into huge wealth very quickly, and whether that's a good thing for the human psyche. And as can be shown in the main portion of Eureka, he's not a very happy person. You feel like he's trying to be happy-go-lucky, but he's not fully satisfied with the way his life has turned out. And there's a great scene when he's in bed and he's really just like fed up, and his wife asks him what's wrong. And I forget the exact wording, but in a roundabout way, I think what he says is, I used to have it all, and now I just have everything. And that kind of just sums up the whole movie. It's a brilliant line, and brilliantly delivered as well. So I think this is a really great film that doesn't quite work all the way around from kind of A to B, from start to finish. There are a few kind of uneven edges there, but I think the main content is more than worth the price of admission, and I'm really glad that I watched it. So I'll leave that there for now. I haven't watched any of the extras, so I can't comment on those. But I will leave a little bit of a spoiler talk at the end here, if anyone hasn't seen it and doesn't want to get spoiled about a certain plot detail. So Jack gets killed at the end of the film, and that whole sequence is very it's almost painfully protracted, where these guys are going to kill him. They've made their mind up now, and he's just he's half accepted it, half refuses to believe that he could ever be killed. That he almost has a god complex about himself, I think. But part of him also realizes this as well, and they throw a rock at the back of his head when he gets to Eureka. He goes inside, and it's just the way that they're coming into the ground floor, and he's upstairs, and he's he's taunting them, and they're coming in. It's very quiet, and it's at night, and the wind is flowing in, and then they kill him. And it's not what you expect. At first he gets hit with a club, I think it is, and then he gets laid on the bed, and they start hitting him again, and blood is spraying and stuff, and then it it stops. You think, okay, he's been killed. I guess that's that. But that's not it. He's not fully dead yet. And just very, very matter-of-factly, very calmly, someone comes in with a blowtorch and just starts torching around his face. And all down his body, just burning him, as if cooking something over a stove. And then they just cover him in feathers, and his face just starts melting, and it's there's no dramatic music, there's no big by the guy. They're just just efficient, as if it's, again, like I say, just cooking something, very matter of fact. And that makes it so much more chilling, so much more haunting and unforgettable. And he just gets kind of burnt into place, and it is horrific. And then the third part of the film is the trial, which Rutger Hauer gets framed for. And I like how it doesn't really confirm or deny whether or not he actually killed him. And this was based on a true story as well. But the trial has a big blown up black and white image of his corpse, burnt and feathered, and it's just it's heavy. Anyway, so if you've seen the film, let me know what you think. I just thought that it was it's one of those things where the whole thing doesn't quite work, and is uneven, as I said, but overall I think the highs really sing, and the lows, I can kind of put up with. But there's not even anything bad about the film. It just doesn't. I feel like if certain things kind of connected a little bit better, it could be a real phenomenal film, But it's okay. It doesn't have to be. At least for me. I know people probably see it differently, but Eureka, I'm very glad I watched it, and glad that I own it, and I'll definitely go back to it again and again, especially for that opening sequence, but also for other moments in the film. And Rutger Hauer was a real highlight. Teresa Russell was really good too. I like the way that she played that character, which is a bit of a difficult character to play. There's one more thing. In the court scene at the end, and she's giving this testimony to, you know, her husband, it goes on a bit too long, and I felt like I was watching someone, Teresa Russell, I felt like I was watching her desperately trying to nail the scene. And so I became aware of the acting at that point, because it was a very lengthy monologue she had to give, and it's a very emotional kind of thing she has to go through, and it showed itself a bit too much, which is a shame, I think, because it took me out of it. But, you know, apart from that, it was a very strong film. I enjoyed it very much. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
It's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans of Carlin into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you.